Terrible Terry McGovern was an American professional boxer who held the World Bantamweight and Featherweight championships. He was born in Johnstown, Pennsylvania as John Terrence McGovern. Through most of his career he was managed by Sam H. Harris, who remained a lifelong friend. Many boxing historians considered McGovern's greatest attributes his punching ability and signature charges rather than his boxing style or defensive technique. That the majority of his wins were by knockout speaks to the power of his punch. McGovern was born in Johnstown, Pennsylvania on March 9, 1880, to Irish parents. After the death of his father Joseph, he tried to help support his widowed mother by peddling vegetables after the family moved to South Brooklyn the year after he was born. Starting his professional career in 1897, several of his brothers would also attempt to make a living as boxers. He began boxing at Brooklyn's Greenwood Athletic Club in preliminary bouts at age 16. In his impressive career, McGovern took both the World Bantamweight and Featherweight titles. He defended the World Featherweight title at least 5 times against Joe Bernstein, Tommy White, Aurelio Herrera, and twice against Oscar Gardner. He lost it to young Corbett II, who defeated him in World Featherweight title fights on 2 separate occasions. His victory over Frank Hearn, World Lightweight champion, led some to claim he was also heir to the World Lightweight title, though most sources today believe the bout was not a sanctioned title fight. In his first 36 better publicized bouts before taking the World Bantamweight title, McGovern won an astounding 30, losing only to Johnny Snee and Tim Callahan. His winning streak did not end after taking the Bantamweight title. McGovern won the vacant World Bantamweight Championship on September 12, 1899. In a first-round knockout of British boxer Pedler Palmer before a crowd of 10,000, using a series of heavy body blows. McGovern was only 19 years old, and had been boxing professionally little more than 2 years. The bout took place at the Westchester Athletic Club in New York. The winner was to receive $7,500, and the loser $2,500, both sizable purses for the period, but far less than boxers would make for a world title fight a decade later. The referee was George Seiler. The fight was billed as the 116-pound championship. McGovern wore green trunks for the bout, which he believed gave him luck. This was the first World Championship bout under Queensberry rules to end by a 1-round knockout. McGovern never defended the title, and relinquished it in 1900. On November 18, 1899, he defeated New Yorker Patsy Haley in a first-round knockout in Chicago at Tattersall's in a non-title match. Like many of McGovern's early opponents, Haley was a skilled boxer, yet not a match for McGovern. Haley would become one of the best-known and most respected New York area referees in the 1920s and 1930s, and referee an impressive array of world title fights. On July 16, 1900, in an important bout, McGovern defeated world lightweight champion Frank Hearn in a third-round technical knockout before a crowd of 13,000 in New York's Madison Square Garden. Hearn knocked down McGovern with a blow to the head in the very first round, but McGovern took most of the count before landing on his feet and resuming the fight. Grinning and furious, McGovern was fastest in the third round, showing his signature aggressive style. Hearn was down at least twice in the third round, and had received a telling blow to the face from McGovern before his seconds threw in the sponge. Upon examination after the fight, Hearn was found to have the most substantial injuries to his nose and mouth. The betting on the fight remained even for a considerable time, before McGovern took a slight lead before the fight. As Hearn was the reigning world lightweight champion as a result of just beating Joe Gans, some sources credited McGovern with having taken the world lightweight crown as a result of winning the match by a TKO, but very few give him credit for the title today. On December 22, 1899, McGovern defeated Harry Forbes in what was billed by some sources as a world featherweight match, but the bout was not widely recognized as one. McGovern knocked out Forbes in the second round at the New Broadway Athletic Club. Forbes went down after a terrific right-handed uppercut to the chin from McGovern, who was the aggressor throughout the short match. McGovern had beaten Forbes earlier in a 15th-round knockout in Brooklyn on October 1, 1898. McGovern moved up in weight from bantam, and captured the World Featherweight Championship from George Dixon on January 9, 1900, by scoring a technical knockout in the 8th round at the Broadway Athletic Club in New York. Dixon was not a favorite in the late betting. McGovern seemed to dominate from the 6th round on, using frequent straight, short arm punches into Dixon's body and face. He eventually scored a knockdown. The bout was ended when Dixon's manager threw in the sponge, ending the match. The great lightweight Charlie White was in McGovern's corner for the bout. Some controversy existed among bettors when the officials ruled the fight a knockout when it technically was not, as no 10 count was completed against Dixon. A betting controversy was inevitable, as one source wrote that the Dixon fight was one of the heaviest betting bouts ever staged in America. On June 12, 1900, McGovern defeated Tommy White at the Seaside Sporting Club in a decisive third-round knockout in Brooklyn, New York. After 2 minutes of fighting in the first round, the electric lighting in the club went out, nearly causing a panic among the crowd. 10 minutes later the lights went on again, and the fighting resumed. An attendant fan, Frank Conlon, kept the crowd sedate by whistling a series of tunes. White was seriously outclassed in the battle, as he was knocked down once in the first round, twice in the second, and 4 times in the third. McGovern made no objection to White being half-pound overweight at weigh-in. Referee Johnny White did a full 10 count against White in the third round to end the bout. On November 2, 1900, McGovern defeated the great New York Jewish featherweight Joe Bernstein in Louisville, Kentucky, in a world featherweight title fight. The bout ended in a 7th-round knockout. Bernstein was said to have made a poor showing from the beginning. The fight was stopped by the referee George Seiler when Bernstein could not rise in the 8th round, after more than one knockdown, and a full 8 count. McGovern scored a knockout over the legendary black boxer Joe Gance in a non-title match on December 13, 1900. Gance claimed that he threw the fight. The issue of whether Gance had quit early, and intentionally ended the fight was put to a Chicago district attorney. Both fighters had warrants issued for their arrest for disturbing the peace, which were thrown out the day after the fight. On April 30, 1901, before a crowd of 8,000, McGovern defeated Oscar Gardner at the Mechanics Pavilion in San Francisco in a 4th-round knockout. They fought for a purse of $5,000 with the winner taking 75%. In the 4th round, Gardner was knocked down 3 times before losing to a 10 count after a blow to the stomach. Gardner took a while to recover from the blows of McGovern after the count, and it was feared he was hurt seriously. In another defense of his world featherweight title, McGovern was credited with knocking out Aurelio Herrera in 5 rounds. Herrera afterwards claimed he had been doped during the fight. McGovern lost his world featherweight crown when he was stopped by young Corbett in 2 rounds on November 28, 1901. Corbett also won their rematch. Of their March 31, 1903, rematch in San Francisco, young Corbett was said to have the best of the last 3 rounds of the 11th round knockout. McGovern had only a slight lead in the first 8 rounds, as well as only a slight lead in the early betting. On March 14, 1906, McGovern lost a lightweight match to Battling Nelson at the National Athletic Club in Philadelphia in a 6-round newspaper decision. The fight was described as one of the fastest and most vicious battles ever seen in the ring. In both the 4th and 5th rounds, Nelson staggered McGovern with heavy lefts to the neck and jaw. Although McGovern landed repeatedly on Nelson, his blows did not slow the assault of his opponent. He did not appear to gain an advantage until the 6th round, when he became the aggressor. The bout could not have a referee ruling on points, but the Minneapolis Journal and 4 local Philadelphia newspapers gave Nelson the advantage. McGovern finished his career with a record of 65 wins, 42 KOs, 5 losses, and 5 draws. As was common in that era, he also engaged in many no-decision bouts. In 2003, McGovern was named to the Ring magazine's list of 100 greatest punchers of all time. Boxing historian Nat Fleischer ranked McGovern as the greatest featherweight of all time. He had an estimated lifetime earnings of $203,000, which included his income as a vaudeville entertainer. Like many boxers, McGovern lost some of his fortune betting on horses at the track before his retirement from boxing. He purchased a racehorse and attempted to have one of his brothers ride as a jockey. He showed increasingly poor judgment in his betting as he slipped into mental illness. McGovern spent much of his later life in mental institutions, though he was able to intermittently work odd jobs. He was working as a ticket taker at the Grand Opera House in Brooklyn near the end of his life. 2 months prior to his death, he was visiting Camp Upton, a World War I military port of embarkation on Long Island, when he took ill. He died of pneumonia and Bright's disease, a kidney ailment, in the charity ward of Kings County Hospital, Brooklyn, New York, on February 22, 1918, at the age of 37. He died relatively poor, considering his lifetime earnings. In his final years, he lived on a pension given to him by his manager and promoter Sam Harris. Harris had been managing some of McGovern's remaining wealth as a trust fund, and was able to give a complete estate of $10,000 to McGovern's widow, which included the home they had been living in when McGovern died. Harris looked after McGovern in his waning years, as did his friend Joe Humphreys. McGovern was married, and left one son, Joe, of 19 years, and had two surviving brothers, Philip and Hugh. His final service was at the Church of St. John the Evangelist, and he was subsequently buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Brooklyn. All information in this section is derived from BoxRec, unless otherwise stated. McGovern has a professional record of 80 fights, with 65 wins, 6 losses, 8 draws, and 1 no contest.